Hey folks, welcome to another episode of CIS 2555. Today we're going to work with state cookies and URL encoding. So, I hope you had a good break. You've got the midterm coming up in a little while. If we look at ye old syllabus, just to see what's going on. The midterm is next week, so the week of the 16th. So that means I will be uploading a review material for the midterm sometime, hopefully today or tomorrow. And additionally, you will have your programming assignment 2 assigned, and that will be due April the 3rd. So your program 1 is due on the 13th. So I hope you've been working on it. And again, the midterm will be the week of the 16th. So we'll try to work out maybe one or two midterm times, or a couple different options, or a range of time you can come in and get the midterm to take it. So I will be on the Orchard Ridge campus. If there's absolutely no way you can make it to the Orchard Ridge campus, or you have some sort of other obligations, you just can't do it, or whatever, or we can't arrange a time, then we will work out something with hopefully getting the exam proctored, which means you get a person who's not teaching the test to basically administer the test to you. So again, a lot of stuff to do today. We're not actually, through the video, I'm not going to go over the programming assignment or the midterm, but I will upload those soon, and then if I get any questions about them that seem common, I might maybe record a small segment to try to help with those. But I'll give you a midterm review, and it'll tell you what you can have on the midterm. But basically, you'll be able to have a cheat sheet, both sides, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, both sides. It can be typed or printed or handwritten. It doesn't really matter. You can have anything you want on it, and I don't collect the cheat sheet. You just put whatever you want on it. But it will be closed book, closed notes, and I'll let you know how many questions are on it, and basically what topics you need to understand before you take it. So, alrighty, so let us close that. So, the main topic today is how to work with state cookies and URL encoding. We'll go through a couple different things involved in that. One of the things we have to deal with are view state. The view state, we've already gone over session state a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail in just a little bit. And then we'll make a small modification to the website, the cart application, or shopping cart application we've been dealing with for quite a while now, actually. We will make a modification to it with a starting point. You'll notice, just as a note, you should note that you have a week 7 uploaded. You'll notice there's an EX08 cart, and then the Chapter 8 slides that are also available. So over the EX08 cart, I downloaded it to a directory that I could use, and then I extracted it, and it usually does like a double layer, like it'll put EX08 cart and then another folder named EX08 cart underneath. I just went into the outer layer, cut the one on the inside, went back out, and then pasted it. So it said, do you want to replace this one? I say yes, so it takes it back down to one layer, essentially. So then you can just use this folder directly as the website that you're dealing with. So then I went to, again, File, Open Website, and then opened the website, right-click this, and said to use IIS Express, and then right-clicked Order, and said Set as Start Page, because that's the start page of our application here. So you got to do that when you open up the applications we've been dealing with. So view state is one of the concepts we'll talk about today, and then we'll modify our little application. The view state is, or provides for retaining the pages or values of a page and control properties that change from one execution of the page to another. Before ASP.NET, which is our application server software sends a page back to the client. Okay, so you've got the server over here and the client over here. Before it sends this page back to the client, which is the purpose of the web server, it determines what changes the program has made to the properties of the page and its controls. These changes are encoded in a string that's assigned to the value of a hidden input field named Viewstate. Okay, when the page is posted back to the server, okay, meaning you submit something, or whenever it gets posted back to the server, the Viewstate field is sent back to the server along with the HTTP request. Then ASP.NET retrieves the property values from the Viewstate field and uses them to restore the page and control properties. ASP.NET also uses Viewstate to save values of the page properties it uses, such as isPostBack. So Viewstate is enabled by default. So keep that in mind. It's not used to restore data entered by a user into a text box, for example, or any other input controls, unless the control responds to a change event. If the Viewstate is enabled for a data-bound control, the control will not be bound again when the page is reposted. Instead, the control's values, and again our friend pops up. There we go. Okay, so instead the control's values will be restored from the Viewstate. So if you have it enabled for a control that can take data binding or does data binding, this particular control won't be bound again when the page is posted back to the server and back. So instead, the control values are restored from what's called the Viewstate. Two cases you might want to disable Viewstate. When restoring the control properties for a page affects the way you want the form to work. There are some instances where you might need that, and when the size of the Viewstate field gets so large that it affects performance. So Viewstate is not something you want to necessarily stuff a bunch of garbage into and use it to store data or what have you. But sometimes if it affects the performance, you might look for alternatives. And then they go through an example of how to disable Viewstate for a control page or the entire application. So just notice that web.config, the web.config file, which is in Visual Studio right here, that has settings for the application-wide attributes. So, all right, you can use the state bag to get the information for the Viewstate as well. So that's exactly what you would be using, is this particular class right here. You can use the indexer. So I could say, Viewstate at timestamp in double quotes or something. So it can be used as if it's like a dictionary. Common properties are count, keys, and values. And then common methods, as you would expect, you have a way to add and remove, and also empty the state bag. So these are for Viewstate. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's called state bag, not Viewstate. So that's the actual class, at least. A statement that adds or updates a Viewstate item is Viewstate.add. This is an example. You would put the name of the state, just like you did with session states, comma, and then the value you're storing at that Viewstate value. If I want to retrieve data from the Viewstate, you can put Viewstate and then the state you're looking for, and then you cast it explicitly to the type that you're trying to get. So for example, date time. I'm taking this timestamp here and then converting it to a date time, and then I can store that in this reference variable timestamp, which is for points to a date time type. These are the HTTP session state. We've dealt with session states before in a previous chapter, but in case you forget, this will be kind of a refresher. And also, a lot of this stuff is very similar, right? So it's got pretty much identical methods and an indexer as well. Some properties to be aware of are count and then the session ID. There's an ID for each session that occurs. Statement, these are explicit example. If I want a statement that adds or updates a session state item, so if you treat the session state item as the left hand item on the left hand of the or left-hand operand of the equals sign, the assignment operator. If I put session at email and say equals email, the right-hand operator's value or operand's value will be stored into the left operand's variable, essentially. So this session state variable right here. A statement that retrieves the value is just the opposite. So if I'm trying to get it from the session states to use it, if I have string here, I'm going to say string email equals, and you could put string in front of here, in front of session email to cast it, or try to call the toString method. One of the disadvantages with doing that is that if I don't test for null before I do this, it's going to crash the program. So this, if there isn't anything set for the email session state variable, and I try to say session at email.toString, it could crash, and it probably will. Statement that removes an item, you just say session.remove email. The next thing we'll look at, this is a statement that retrieves a session state item from a non-page class. Okay, so if it's from a class that isn't a page, you can say http context.current.session.at_email.toString. Okay, so you can, even if you have a class that has session state variables in it, you can do that. You just have to do a little bit more work if it's a non-page class. Here are a couple useful event handlers that can be used to get and save data. Load is the name of the event, and page load is the actual handle name. ASP will actually bind anything that you put page underscore then whatever. Any of these will be bound automatically. So you can just write that name as long as it has the correct signature, and ASP will bind it to the page loading. So page load, for example, occurs when a page is first requested from the server after all the controls have been initialized and the view state has been restored. You could use the handler for this event to test whether the session state object actually exists, to get data from it if it does, and to create one if it doesn't. For page pre-render, this event occurs after all the control events for the page have been processed, but before the HTML has been sent back to the browser that generated. So you can use it to update value types. Excuse me. You can use it to update value types, type variables in the object, but you don't need to update reference types using this. So for value type, this example right, that's not the example I was looking for. I thought it was in here. Oh, where is it? I think it might be a couple down. But anyway, for a value type, if you're trying to update the, here it is. If you try to update a value type like this, we notice that the count here, this count variable, this will be storing an integer. We'll assume that session count is an integer because it's just counting. Now, since integers are a value type in C#, if you recall from some of the brief information I've given you on C#, or if you've had a C# class, I think I mentioned this. If I didn't, then shame on me. But there are two major categories of types of variables that are in C#. Value type variables are those that store the data directly, whereas reference type variables are basically like pointers to other memory locations that actually store the data. So they're kind of indirect in that way. The value types consist of all the primitives like integer and double and decimal and float, and even structures are considered value types and treated as such. So they store the data directly. If you have to update a value type, then you're going to have to call this every time you do it. So if I'm updating it, I have to change it. I have to set it here, or in some button event or whatever event you plan on using it for. But for reference types, if you think about how reference types work, if this were a reference type right here and I was setting some variable like customer info or something, and I was setting it to an object, then whenever the object itself got updated, it would automatically change what this was pointing to. So you don't have to restore it. You don't have to say, set it equal to such and such. There are 4 modes for storing session state data. The session state data is by default stored in the server's memory, and it tracks the user sessions using cookies. So that's the default behavior. So the default is called in-process mode. This is the one that stores the data in the IIS memory in the same process as the application. This is the default, but it's only suitable when a single server is used for application. If you have a server farm, then or you have a bunch of web servers that it's sharing, then you need to probably consider using the state service. This stores the data in server memory under the control of ASP.NET's state service. Now, the state server is the mode, the name of the mode. This service can be accessed by other IIS servers. Okay, so it can be used when an application is hosted on a web farm. Okay, SQL Server is another way to keep persistent data. This stores data in an SQL Server database. This mode is used for applications that require more than one IIS server. This mode is slower than in process, right here, and state server mode, but it's the most reliable. So one thing to keep in mind when you use SQL Server is that it's actually storing it in a database. So that means it's writing values to a database. So that's actually going to take a lot longer relatively than the other two. And then you've got custom, where you can write your own session state store provider class for the session state data. It's out of the bounds of what we're really doing right now, but you might want to look into it if you have special circumstances or requirements for your program. 2 options for tracking session IDs. You have cookie-based and cookieless. The cookie-based is more secure, but in some cases browsers browsers don't support cookies. So you might need to use cookieless. With cookie-based tracking session IDs, that just uses the cookies. These are these little tiny, either in-memory or file things, and then cookieless will actually store it in the URL, but that's less secure because the URL is visible to the user, and this isn't encrypted unless you encrypt the value before you put it in the query string. So this could pose a security risk. That's why cookies are often a better choice. All right, and then this is application-wide stuff. So this gives an example of what you can do in the web config. Now, another thing we're going to talk about is application state and caching. Okay, so application state. First, we have to understand what an application is in terms of ASP.NET, and you probably have an idea about what it is, but we're formalizing it here. So an ASP.NET application is the collection of pages, so the web pages, the code behind files, and other classes, and other files within a single directory on a web server. So you've got the resource files as well, anything else you put on there. An application begins when the first user requests a page that's a part of the application. Then ASP.NET initializes the application before it processes the request for the page. As part of its initialization, ASP creates these 3. You have an application object, okay, that's created from the HTTP application class. You also have an application state object created from the, not surprising, HTTP application state class. And then you have a cache object created from the, oh, you guessed it, the cache class. These objects exist for the duration of the application, so as long as this application is running. If it's not stopped and started again, or machines powered down or what have you, and items stored in the application state or cache are available to all users of the application, so it's in memory, not written on disk. Once an application has started, it doesn't normally end until the web server is shut down. So if they have to do like web server restarts and things like that, that happens. Cache concepts. These are good for data that change infrequently, and you also don't want to use it a lot because, well, it's good. It's good to use for larger, for some large pieces of data, but you also have to be aware that if the server restarts, it will actually, this won't be here anymore. So it can improve performance, especially for like large static pieces of data. And I don't mean static as in the keyword or programming concept, but static from a from a design point, the data that's not going to change frequently. For example, if you need to track, the names of a bunch of states, or the names of the colors on a particular variety of color wheel, or if you have to keep track of the names of faculty from a particular division that doesn't change very frequently, or something like that, maybe it would make sense to load it into a cache object. But also be aware, you can set them with an expiration date in the cache, so that means this could expire. And another thing that you have to be aware of is that the data in the cache can be scavenged by the server to recover memory when memory is low. So if a lot of high intensity stuff's happening on the website, the data or the memory can be scavenged back. So that means it could copy over your cache, and you wouldn't have any control over it. It would just destroy them. So you have to, when you get something back from the cache, you should check to see if it's null first. So when it's scavenged by the server, then it will set your variables, or your variables will be detected or considered null at that point. So be aware of that. Now, we know about application concepts and cache concepts, so what about application state? The items stored in the application state object stay in server memory until they are specifically removed, or until the application ends. Application state is most appropriate for storing small items of data that change as an application executes. So unlike the cache, where if the items don't change frequently, the cache might be more appropriate for that. With the application state, if the application state, the items do change frequently, and they're small items, then this could be okay. To make sure the application object's not accessed by more than one user at a time, you should lock it while updating and unlock it when you're done. So you actually have a method you'll call for locking and unlocking. We'll see that in the example. Here are indexers and property, and also the application state here. These are methods, properties, and indexer of the application state. Add and remove, which you should expect, count, and then also the indexer. You also have an insert method of the cache class. We will see that in action a little bit later too. And then the attributes of the common methods of the HTTP application state include clear, which empties it, lock and unlock. So I said you had to call it first, lock first, and then unlock when you're done editing it. Then these are the two methods you would use. So you call lock, do whatever editing you have to do, and then you have to remember to unlock it when you're done. Here's two statements that add items to the application state and cache. So first you have application.add, and then give it values, and then similarly cache.add. You'll notice that in each of these circumstances, the second parameter, the second argument in this case, because it's the actual thing that's passed in, the first one is an integer, the second one's a string, but essentially these behave the same way as far as from an interface standpoint. Two statements that retrieve an item from application state and cache are these examples. So they show you how to set or add items to the cache or the state, and then how to get items from the cache or the state. Notice you do have to convert the data that comes back from either the application or the cache. So in this case, they're casting it. In this case, they're calling convert int 32. That's because it's a value type. These are two statements that retrieve an item from a non-page class. So they show you, you have to call it off of the HTTP context. Okay, pretty much most of what we'll deal with, I think, at least at first, will be page classes, though, so you don't have to worry as much about this, but just be aware that these exist. You just have to do a little bit more work here. A statement that adds an item to the cache with an absolute expiration time. So you can call cache.insert. You first give it the name as the first parameter, and then you give it the value. Okay, it says states is the value. Then you have this third parameter, which is I think it's the dependency. Yeah, it's the dependency. That's a dependency object, which is often null. The dependency object is kind of outside the scope of what we're going to be doing right now. Then you have datetime.now.addMinutes. This would be, these two are actually, these two last parameters are actually mutually exclusive. So if you test one, or if you set one to a particular time and you try to set the other, say if I put datetime.now.addMinutes and then datetime.now.addMinutes something else, or any value that's a datetime, anything other than one of the no sliding expiration or no absolute expiration, if you put it to anything like that, then you're going to have an error if you try to set both of them at the same time. So these are mutually exclusive. You need to do one at a time. The other one has to have a value of, say, for example, no sliding expiration. Okay, that's for the last one. If you set the sliding, then this one should be, the fourth parameter should be no absolute expiration. So you can only use one at a time. Now the sliding expiration has to do with like 20 minutes from last usage. Okay, so like is the user active and things like that. That's the sliding expiration. Absolute expiration is regardless, for example, 20 minutes from now. That's what the datetime.now.addMinutes is, right? 20 minutes from now. These are 4 common application events. These are application level events: application start, application end, session start, session end. They're even higher level than, say, page load and things like that. This would be in a global.asax file. Okay, that's not a typo. That's on purpose. This creates an object in the application state. So as the application starts, if you want to do something here, for example, add a thing called hit count. Then you've got application end. You've also got application error, if there's an error, a code that runs when an unhandled error occurs, right? These are for session start, session end as well. We've got other things. Notice they're locking the application and then unlocking when they're done. Then they're retrieving the hit count in here, so modifying it. Cookies. You probably hear a lot about cookies at some level. Cookies store information locally. Sometimes things like anti-malware applications will pick them up because they can store information that could be personal, and sometimes you don't want things to do that. So some people choose to turn their cookies off, but most people have them enabled. Here's an example, and sometimes the website will even say you must have cookies enabled in order to use this website, and then the person can decide whether or not they want to use it. This is an example of a cookie, or of cookies. So you've got the ASP.NET session ID. This is obviously not a very heavily human readable session ID. And then you've got email, for example, you could set user ID, which would be something you'd come up with. There are two primary ways to create a cookie. You've got, that should actually be lowercase new, but new cookie, HTTP cookie, which is the data type name, on name, or with name value for a name value pair. So the mere existence of a cookie sometimes is enough. So sometimes you would just say equals new HTTP cookie with some sort of name. So when the server goes to read that and it says, oh, that exists, okay, well, that's enough information for me. Other times you want to actually put specific values. And then there are common properties such as expires name, secure, and value. Code that creates a session cookie. There's an example right here. And then there's a persistent cookie right here. To make them persistent, you basically set the expires, right? So if you're wondering what the difference is, the session cookies are just loaded in the browser's memory. They're basically kept in browser memory. When the browser session ends, the contents of any session cookies are lost. Most of what you're probably thinking of as cookies are the persistent cookies. So it'll write the cookie, set an expiry value, For example, good for a year or something like that. Sometimes good for 2 days or whatever. Then when you load it again, you can get data from that same cookie. That's a persistent cookie because it's written to disk. So they're actually maintained after the browser session ends. It's not volatile. The cookie class has an indexer, just like pretty much everything else we've seen. It has a count, add, clear, and remove, right? So you should be seeing some patterns here. We could create a method that, for example, adds a cookie. You create the cookie here, say new HTTP cookie, username, and then get a value that, say, the user has typed in a text box, and then set an expiration date from a year from now to a year from now. And then you load the response object cookies with the name cookie. With an HTTP request object, this is the object that's sent to the server. So when this is loaded with data right here, it's pretty similar. You would just say something like this. I would say, as long as the request cookie is not null, I'm going to set the label's username to welcome back, and then whatever the user's name is, and then a period or an exclamation point at the end or whatever. If you want to delete a cookie, it's actually pretty simple. You get the cookie's name and store it in a cookie variable, set the expiry date to something in the past. So you could even just say time now minus 1 second, and then that's in the past. So if it's in the past, the browser will know to delete the cookie when you respond back to the user. So that's why you're setting it into the past. See, you didn't think you'd be learning time travel this semester, did you? I'm not going to go through this extensively, but sometimes you might want to make sure your website works for situations even when the user does not have cookies enabled. So this just goes through how do I go through and actually tell it, hey, I want to disable all of the cookies. So they give you an example for Internet Explorer, and then Mozilla or Google Chrome, and then Mozilla Firefox, and then they talk about then they start talking about query strings. So the query strings are the strings that are added to the end of this is what we call URL encoding. So once you have a particular file such as order.aspx, if you want to use query strings, you first delimit it by putting a question mark after it, and then you have cat equals costumes or whatever, some variable equals some value. If you want to separate the values and variables, you put an ampersand in between them. Okay, so if I had 3 or 4, you'd just put more ampersands between the key value pairs. However, again, note that this is not encoded, so you probably wouldn't want to put things like passwords and things like this in the URL, because that's going to be sent over the clear. It's not encrypted, so it's not secure. If it's just basic information and it's simple, or there's a reason to do this, like product number or whatever you're loading from a database you need to send, maybe it's okay. And you've probably seen many different sites that do something like this as well. So this shows you a hyperlink with a URL that includes a query string. So we're using URL encoding here. Sets the navigate URL here, the hyperlink. This is an ASP server control. Navigate URL equals, and then inside of here, product.asp, then question mark, that separates the name of the page from the query strings. You've got this value and other values. An anchor element with a URL that includes a query string. So if you actually put it in HTML, you can also still have query strings. That's not an ASP centric thing. Query strings are used all over the place. URL encoding is. Now, to obtain the values from the query string, you don't have to do any wild, crazy parsing on your own. You just say equals request. That's an object. That's the request object. Dot query string, and then give it the name. So if I want the value of cat, which was passed in right here, cat equals fx. So I would pass that in and say I want cat, and then it will return the fx and everything I need there. This is a URL that is used inside of a redirect method. Maybe the category ID is set dynamically somehow, or they click on a particular page and you want it to generate this dynamically. You can do that. So you set the cat equals category ID. This is what we call an SEO friendly URL. We're not getting into that just yet, but it just shows you kind of what it looks like. You got properties and things like that. We'll look at that in a later chapter. I think it's chapter 11, but I'm not 100% sure. Then they're going to show you the order page that uses cookie and application state, which we're going to actually do in just a second. You'll notice it says welcome back Mary. Okay, well, how did it know it was Mary? Well, they entered their name on the checkout page. That's how it knows it was Mary. Okay, so we're not going to go deeply into that. We're going to actually do the example. We're not doing the extra, so I think we're done with that. Let's look here at our application, and in case you're interested in following along with this, it's on page 294 in the C# version of the book. When we run this, I did remove the trace feature step, so if you're following along and you get confused, I'm not going to bother doing step 4. It's in chapter 5 if you want to have more, if you want to check that out, that's fine. But okay, here's the order page. We had to set that as the main page by right-clicking. If I say I want to order 2 of these, I add it to cart. I'm in the shopping cart here, and I go to checkout. It'll say please log in, so I'm going to put, okay, Bob Johnson here is the guy logging in. Obviously, normal circumstances you'd have things like passwords and probably things like that, but I hit continue and it says welcome back Bob. So it's taking the first name that I put back over in the stuff, and when I go here or put back in the login, when I go to checkout now, checkout page 1 asks me to log in again. Okay, well, let's put Mary Johnson. Maybe Mary Johnson wants to do something. Okay, welcome back, Mary. Well, the one problem is that it's not refilling this, even though I just hit the back button. But in general, if I click go to cart and then click checkout again, it's going to reset this. So these values are not populating. So that's something I might want to take care of. Let's see, Bob Dinglesworth. Okay. And it'll tell you the number of page hits. So we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. And it'll tell you when was the last update as well. So last update. If I keep hitting this, notice it's increasing the number of page hits. Okay, so we'll see how it's doing that in just a second. All right, so the application seems to work. And if I enter a different name and then click on it again, it says, welcome, whatever the new name is. But we want to use, we want to now add cookies or session state to restore the data in the checkout page. So let's modify the code behind file for the checkout page so that the first and last name fields are restored when the user returns to the page by getting the data from the cookies that are created. So the checkout, if I go in here and then go to view code, you'll note that currently the first and last name are not restored. Okay, so we need to create a page load event for this. So inside of checkout, if I go into design here and double click off in the blank area, it creates a page load method here. I'm going to actually put that near the top because that just seems more natural to me to have page load near the top. And then inside of page load, when the page loads, I want to restore the data from a cookie that's set. As a reference page, let me see if I can find it here. Okay, 283 as a reference page, they kind of give you the example of what you're supposed to do to retrieve the value of the cookie, and that's exactly what they're telling you to do. They want to restore when the user returns to the page. So that means in page load, we're going to put something like this. We're going to say if not is post back. Okay, that's the first part. And if is post back. Okay. All right, and then inside of there, we're going to say if I don't know why they did that. That's kind of funky, but I'll do it their way. Okay, request.cookies, I think it's just to make it more clear what's going on here, but I don't know that that helps. Okay, so they're saying if not, the request cookies username equals null. Oh, we don't want username, sorry. We want first name. We want first name. Their example was username. We want first name and last name, actually. But anyway, if we get the first name, then we want to set the text box down here. Notice they're actually doing the setting for us. So they are setting the cookie information. Now we have to get the cookie information. So this is how we make use of it. So text first name dot text is equal to request dot cookies at first name dot toString. So as long as it's not null, we're good. If I'm going to put not request dot cookies last name equals null, and we do essentially the same thing for this. TXT last name equals request dot cookies at last name dot toString. All right. So we're setting the values back into the text boxes. So that's just so the user doesn't have to retype the name when they go to the checkout again. So make sure I got everything. 5-minute life. Okay. So the expiration time when you click the button is 5 minutes. So do note that they've already done this in the button continue here. But let's do this. When I run the application, let's say I'm adding, it says welcome back Bob. Oh yeah, you remember me. Okay, so add to cart this. I'm going to check out again. Well, that didn't work, did it? Well, system.web.http cookie doesn't exactly sound what I want. First name and last name request.cookies. Let's see what we did wrong here. Oh, I know. That's dumb. Okay. So I think I did. Yeah, you need the dot. You need dot value. Okay, let's do that. Dot value. Yeah, value is already a string, so we don't have to call string on that. I goofed. Okay, dot value. Let's try it again. No biggie. Live television. Okay, so to add to cart. There it is. Checkout. All right, so now when I put John, I'm going to put John Baugh, hit continue. Oh, yay, okay. I'll add more. Let's add 4 deranged cats. Then go to checkout. Oh, look, my name's there again. See, it wasn't there before, so we've just restored it. So it's continually restoring it. You'll also notice, though, if I go to the cart again and then check out, if I do change the name, let's say someone else decides they want to order something, it'll say welcome back Jackson, and then that'll be their cart from now on. So, right? So it doesn't work exactly the way you'd expect a full-fledged industry level application, but it does give, the whole point of this is to show you the different aspects. But you'll notice the welcome uses whatever name is stored in the cookie. Let's say that we want to comment out the code for using the cookies to restore the entries on the checkout page, and then we want to write new code that uses session state instead of cookies to restore the first and the last entries. So I would direct you as a good reference page. Let's do 269, and then go over how to use session state. So I'm going to comment this out. Just give me a second here. All right. I'm going to comment this out. So again, your shortcut in Visual Studio is Control-K, Control-C. That comments out this code here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's do this. If we call .toString on these, like they tell you on page 269, you might have a bad day because the values might be null, so that's going to cause you problems. So we're gonna actually cast it explicitly using the string cast operation. So I'm going to say this: string first name equals this is using session now, so session variable first name, not the cache. All right, so I'm going to actually, let's do that. I'm going to cast that to a string. There we go. Session we don't have to call value on. String last name equals string session. Okay, last name. All right, so basically we want it to do the exact same thing, or have the behavior to be exactly the same. So we have to decide what exactly we want to do. Well, the first thing we're going to check, we're going to say if the first name is not equal to null, and you also are going to do the last name in like manner. Oh, 1 second. There we go. Txt first name dot text. We're just going to set equal to first name. Sound good? Then, if the last name is not equal to null, txt the first name should be first name. Well, that was silly, wasn't it? Okay. Okay, dot text is equal to last name. There we go. Make sure we're good here. Yep. Okay. So that should work on that end, but we haven't set the session state variable here. So if the page is valid, when they click continue, we want to set the session state. So the way we do that is we set session at first name. Now notice this is not the same as the cookie. Even though we're using the same name, we could use a completely different name if we wanted to. I'm going to set txt name.first and session at last name, being very careful to type them correctly. All right. Okay, we set the values that way. Okay, so we're saying session values rather than using cookies. We could comment out the cookie code if we wanted to, really. So let's say KC. Making sure. Yeah, comment out the code for the cookies. Okay. So at this point, if I were to run the application, let's see if it's going to sort of work for us. I'm going to say 1, add it to the cart, go to cart, checkout. There's nothing in here. Well, that's kind of silly, isn't it? Well, let's see. This is maybe it's detecting it. This is our first time. Let's see what happens. Welcome back, Jackson. That's interesting. 3, add to cart, checkout. Still not working quite right, is it? This part isn't, at least. It says welcome back, Jackson. What about if I go back to the cart and then go to checkout? Well, it is restoring the name I originally put in, but look here, this is kind of goofy. It's saying welcome back, Jackson. Well, what's the problem here? Well, this is the page order.aspx. So let's open up order.aspx and then view the code behind file and see what's happening in here. If you look here carefully, you'll notice, oh, it's still using our friend the cookie, and we already commented out the cookie in the other page, so Control K, Control C. I'm going to use session state, so I'm going to say string. We're just using the first name, right? So we don't need to get the last name, so I'm just going to say session at first name. Let's do this, okay. If yeah, I gotta cast it. 1 second. String. There we go. So we're casting it to a string. If first name is not equal to null, then we're going to set the label welcome text equal to welcome back first name, and then they put an exclamation point at the end. So we're good on that. Let's see if that works now. I'm going to build it. And we're going to run it with Internet Explorer one more time and see what happens. Let me see here. 2, add to cart here. Good. Checkout. Well, haven't logged in yet, so we'll put John Baugh. Continue. Oh, good. Welcome back, John. Yay. Go to cart. Checkout. Oh, it's still got my name here. That's exactly what we want. Well, what if we change it? It should change, right? So let's say it's Mary. I hit continue. Welcome back, Mary. There we go. Go to cart. Checkout. There we go. It's back. The name's back. So everything's working pretty well. Let's change the last name just to make sure, because we want to do thorough testing, right? Go to cart checkout. It's back to Mary Johnson. Very good, though, but it still says welcome back, Mary. All right. The last thing we're going to take a look at is our usage of caching. So we've basically changed some of the stuff from using the cookies to using session state. So we've used cookies and session state to do this. Now we're going to not use the application state up here, and we're going to instead use the cache instead of application state. So this is basically giving us a very good introduction of what we need to do. So on page 277 and around that area, they kind of show you a little bit about how to use the application state and cache data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out. You'll notice that the hit count, how the hit count behaves, it's working currently, but we're going to use a different method. It says number of hits, page hits. If I keep resetting this or refreshing it, it's still putting number of page hits, right? Since this application was run. So that's working, but we're going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to comment out, Control K, Control C, comment out the application unlock code. I am going to use int hit count here, but we're going to use the cache instead. So I'm going to say equals convert dot to int 32. We could also use int dot parse, and you're going to call it on the cache at hit count, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put hit count plus plus, and then I'm going to set cache hit count equal to the new hit count. And I don't really need to change the code down here. It's still valid. So let me build this, run it again. Let's see if our little hit count works. Okay, so currently it says 1. If I keep refreshing it, you'll notice it is actually incrementing the way it should, right? Hit count's increasing. That's pretty impressive. So all those little hit counts you might have played with on getting gizmos from other sites, you're now doing it from scratch. You're making your own hit counter here using you saw how to use application state, but you're using cached data at this point. So it's pretty cool, right? So, and this, notice it still maintains it. So, all right. So I think that's it for the day. Let me make sure. Uses caching to do that with a 5-minute live. Okay. Right. Yeah, well, okay, we could do this. We could also, if we want to, we could use the insert method. I'll just leave that as an exercise for you. But at the bottom of page 277, there's a cache.insert. It's pretty straightforward. You would just say cache.insert, cache.insert, and then you would give the name hit count, and then you'd say comma, the name of the value that you're putting in it. Okay, so what are we doing as the value, right? And then comma null, comma, then how much time you want to give it, and then system web caching, cache no sliding. You know what? Yeah, I just gave it to you, so we might as well do it this way, right? So let me do this. Let's see if this works. Okay, so cache dot insert. We're going to put hit count, comma, hit count. Okay, those are same as pretty much what we were using with add. Null for the cache dependencies. And then the absolute expiration, datetime.now.add minutes. They say actually in the instructions add 5 minutes, so there we go. There's your 5 minutes. Comma, system.web. Caching cache. I know it's annoying, isn't it? No sliding expiration. Right? Okay, let's see if this works. And it still should maintain the hit count at the bottom, right? If we were to wait 5 minutes, there would be an expiration, though. But I'll let you test that out. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. With your questions. I will upload your programming assignment number 2 as well as your information for the midterm, and I will post times and days for the midterm, the time and the date of the midterm. And that's pretty much it. So hope you have a great day. Again, email me if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Bye.